Hello, my name's Alan Rooney. I'm the Managing Director of the Cultural Experience. Joining a tour with the Cultural Experience, you're going to be with like-minded people, people that share a passion for history. You've probably read about the subject matter that the tour focuses on, but there's nothing like actually being out on the ground to see how that influenced the way that history unfolded. Take a battlefield, for example, to be able to see the folds in the ground, to appreciate how the climate and the geography affected the decisions of the commanders and how the campaign itself rolled out. It's another dimension that you've really got to understand if you're going to appreciate military history fully. From an archaeological perspective, to understand how those generations, those cultures in the past lived and breathed and how they affect us today, you've got to go out there and see how they built and how they lived in their different civilizations. So it's very important to be able to see the ground, to feel the history and to be there and to share those experiences, as I say, with like-minded people and learn more. We have all walks of people that come on tours with the Cultural Experience. That can range from individual travellers, both single men and women will come along. We have families, we have couples, and all ages really, from fathers and sons, and we do have quite a few retired people coming along on the tour. They come from all parts of the world. Whilst predominantly from the United Kingdom, we have a very large percentage that come from North America and from Australia and New Zealand. So all are welcome and all have one thing in common, that they share the passion for history. So you can be sure that if you come along on one of these tours, you're going to be very much in like-minded company. A typical day on tour with the Cultural Experience starts with a really good breakfast in the hotel, and then normally we're on the road around about 9 o'clock. If the hotel is situated close to the location, then we'll probably just walk to where we're going to in the company of your guide, who during the journey will probably engage in some sort of narrative or analysis of the historical subject that we're going to cover. When you get to the ground will be pointed out to you, the buildings, the importance, and the guide will give a small vignette around that subject matter. They have an opportunity to explore the area, talk with fellow guests, and ask questions of the guide in situ. We then probably break for about half an hour to an hour. We try not to make anything fancy of lunches. A beer or a coffee and a sandwich is the norm. There may be occasions when we go into countries where we're not as comfortable as individuals in going in to order such services, where we may provide the lunch for you, and that might take a slightly longer duration. Then in the afternoon, visiting more sites, and normally we're back in the hotel around about 5:30, 6 o'clock, where there's an opportunity either to check into the new hotel, wash up, brush up, relax, and then we all meet down in the bar around about 7:30, where we share a drink, recount the day's experiences, before sitting down to a hearty 3-course meal, which is normally served with wine and coffee, and the conversation about the day continues, often led by your tour manager or your tour guide, and you can explore that subject matter to your heart's content until the small hours of the morning, if that's the way that you're inclined, or retire to bed after your coffee, ready for the following day. My favourite battlefield is the battlefield of Austerlitz. I love that battlefield, not just because of its historical importance as far as the story of Napoleon is concerned, but actually because of its location. It's situated just outside the beautiful city of Brunn, and when we run a tour out there, it's normally spent over 3 nights in Brunn, a lovely historical city. One day is spent enjoying the reenactment that normally takes place, and then the following day exploring the battlefield itself. And that battlefield is relatively untouched. The Russians had a go at putting a radar station on there during the Cold War, and that was taken over, I believe, by NATO, and it's still there, but that just helps as an aid to be able to pinpoint the Pratzen Heights. The battlefield itself is very, very little changed. It's great to walk over. It's a great story, and anybody that I've taken to that battlefield has never failed to be impressed by its size, the story, and the general geography. Many people that know me probably would think that had I been living 200 years ago as a soldier, I would have probably wanted to serve under the Emperor Napoleon. However, having explored many of Wellington's campaigns and also being a student at Wellington himself, I really appreciate how much he cared for his men. That he always made sure that they were taking advantage of the folds of the ground, that he never committed to them until absolutely necessary, that he got them to lie down, protect themselves, he looked after their welfare, and very rarely, sieges accepted, did he engage in a frontal assault and needlessly waste lives. Whereas Napoleon, virtually every battle that he fought at, while strategically or even tactically brilliant, involved the sacrifice of a great many lives. So I think if I was a soldier, whose army would I want to be serving in? Then I think it would be the Duke of Wellington's. If I wanted the glory, if I wanted to live in the times and take advantage of the meritocracy that the Napoleonic regime represented, well then I guess I'd want to be in the times of Napoleon, but I'm not so sure I'd want to be in his army. Not unless, of course, I was a marshal and I could wear those leery uniforms, but otherwise a soldier in Wellington's army. When I was carrying out a reconnaissance for our 1807 Napoleon in Poland tour to what is today the Kaliningrad region of Russia, we had to carry out a number of recces of the battles of Eylau and of Friedland. Now, Eylau is straddled between the Polish border and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. It's quite a difficult place to get, and when we did the recce, and this is going back about 15 years ago I guess, we didn't appreciate that the Russian side of the battlefield was actually part of a military zone which civilians, and certainly foreign civilians, were not entitled to be in unless they had some sort of authority, some pass. And in my naivety, not appreciating that, and it being a very flat battlefield, the only place that I could see that would give me any commanding height to get a reconnaissance of the place was the watchtower of the nearest KGB border guard camp. So I walked into the camp through the gates and there was no Russian guards to be seen. And so I shouted, "Hello, is anybody there?" And then suddenly from nowhere came 2 or 3 of these Russian border guards, and I was summarily arrested and taken into one of their rooms for questioning. And it wasn't long before this chap turned up in a leather jacket, came alongside me and aggressively asked me what I was doing there. And I explained I was exploring the battlefields of 1807. He said, "I know." He said, "We've been watching you on the Polish side. You've been driving around in this Mercedes car." He said, "And I can see that you're a student of the Napoleonic Wars." He said, "Unfortunately for you," he said, "so am I." And he went into his drawer, and out of his filing cabinet he drew out a bottle of vodka and 2 glasses, poured us both a glass, and then out of his other drawer he brought out the maps of the Battle of Eylau, and for the next half hour or so we poured all over those maps, working out where we were going to take the group on that tour. So that was a very memorable moment, one that could have been a disaster for me, but actually turned out to be of great advantage, because Sergei, the colonel concerned, when we came back with the group 6 months later, he jumped on the coach and he opened all the doors for us on that tour, and we've been able to have those doors open for us ever since. I was first attracted to military history by my cousin John, and I must have been about the age of 4. And John is about 5 or 6 years older than me. And when I went round to his house, age 5 or 6, John was hitting 11 or 12, and his time was up with the dinky toys that he used to keep in the coal cellar in the back garden. And so I got these dust-covered dinky toys to play with at the age of 4 or 5, and I guess that led on to Airfix soldiers, and I started painting those, and then I did a bit of wargaming, and then I got bored with the wargaming but became fascinated with the period, and the period we were wargaming were the Napoleonic Wars, and I became very fascinated by the man Napoleon, and indeed the times that surrounded by Napoleon and the meritocracy that that regime represented, and the rest, as they say, was history. My favourite historical film has got to be Waterloo. I think Rod Steiger plays Napoleon fantastically well. For a method actor, he's clearly studied Napoleon's mannerisms, and that's best demonstrated during the abdication scene at Fontainebleau, and also when he approaches the 5th Line Regiment just outside of Grenoble. I think the actual scenes from the Battle of Waterloo are most remarkable, and the actors that play the various parts are just so well suited to their parts. I think the duration is great, but there's no better time than on Sunday afternoon, maybe at Christmas when it's shown on TV, to be able to sit down with a beer in hand and to read out those lines along with the actors at the same time, and you're almost there. If you're passionate about your history, if you're the kind of person that reads more than one book on a subject matter, or if the book that you've read piques your interest that you want to learn more, then actually you've really got to go out and visit the places where history took place. You've got to discover those great moments of world history, to get out there to see where great deeds were done, to understand why decisions were made, to see the folds in the ground, to be able to see how commanders' decisions were influenced by the climate, by the terrain. None of this you're going to get from your books, but if you get out there and you look at that ground, then you'll really get another dimension in your understanding of history. So that's one of the main reasons that you've got to go out to go and enjoy a tour with a cultural experience. Maybe it's military history, but maybe it's archaeology. Understand how civilizations lived, how they planned their sites, and come back, answer those questions in your mind, and then go and read and find out some more. And that's going to pique your interest to come back hopefully on a second tour. The biggest blunder in military history, and certainly in British military history, has got to be the reinforcement of Singapore at the beginning of the Second World War, just days before the Japanese commenced their attack on the island. The failure for them to appreciate that the place could be assaulted by land and not just by sea resulted in the largest surrender of British forces in the whole of British history. That's got to be the biggest blunder for me.